Good morning, everyone. We're waiting for quite a lot of people to arrive. There's 69 already. Good morning, Ahmed. Oh, good morning, everyone. Everyone's putting comments in the chat. It's good to see. Good morning from Fez. Hi. If you can be patient for maybe a minute or two while we wait for most people to arrive, and then we can kick off. Great, we've got people excited about the presentation today. Already got lots of comments. People from all over, from the north, from the south, from the center, from the east, from the sunshine of Agadir. Darbeda is in the house. And not just people from the big cities, but from the smaller towns. It's great to see. Oh, out in Nadur. Yeah, I hope you've had some rain at some point over there. Beni Milal, Hamadia, Tangier, Sefru. Okay, we have more than 100 people here. We'll wait maybe one more minute and then we'll kick off. Kenitra, Tamara, Tingis.
I guess my mic is better now.
That's very clear, Miriam.
Yeah.
Just to let everyone know, before we started, we had a little technical run and Miriam sounded like she was in a cave. But now it's perfect. Ushta's in the house. Well, it's great to see such a turnout for C1 Advanced webinar. Right, maybe we can make a start. Miriam, with your wonderful microphone.
Good morning, all of you from all over Morocco. So it's such a great pleasure to say these few words. In fact, we had a dream, Simon and I, and our dream was really to make C1 big in Morocco. And thanks to the Cambridge team, and thanks to Calliope's team, and thanks, of course, to you, dear teachers, we made it happen. So we are so excited to have Ben with us. And in order to celebrate your hard work as teachers, because it is thanks to your efforts that we have achieved very beautiful results, I would say, with our students, because I can tell you very proudly that in several areas of Morocco, we had students who got a C1 advanced and even better, a C2 proficiency. So a big clap to all of you, to all the teachers. In fact, thanks to your hard work, the level of ELT in Morocco has really improved. So thanks again. I don't want to keep you too long because it's not the purpose to listen to me. The purpose is really to have you hear from Ben and from Simon about C1 Advanced. So I wish you a very good session and a very nice weekend.
Thank you very much, Miriam, and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking time on probably a chilly Saturday morning. We appreciate that you've turned up. Just in terms of some housekeeping, as we say in Cambridge, some logistics for the session. Ben will give his presentation until round about noon, and then we'll leave 15 minutes for curated questions at the end. If you do have questions or if you want to make a point, I saw somebody raise their hand. We're not going to take any interruptions between now and noon, but please do put your questions in the Q&A. So I know that lots of people have been putting comments in the chat, which is great. We welcome that. I'll certainly be looking through them. But for the questions that you would like to be addressed, then in the Q&A, and we'll address them at the end. Miriam and I did have a dream, but it was Miriam's dream. It was the wonderful Calliope team who talked to me in the spring about the possibility of organizing something to promote C1 Advanced, the most prestigious, the most recognized qualification that we have. And I looked at the numbers, and it's way less than 2% of all our exams in Morocco are the C1 Advanced. So I thought this is a crazy idea. But at the same time, we see that there's year-on-year growth of 50%, more candidates year-on-year in Morocco, which is great to see. But it's still a very small number. So the last year, I think in 2023, there were only about 250 candidates. And you can see the results all over the world for everyone who takes all of our exams. If you type into a search engine, grade statistics, Cambridge English, so grade statistics, Cambridge English, you can see the results that go back all the way to 2004. And I was looking at those, and one of the reasons why we wanted to run this session is that while we have 3.7 of the Moroccan candidates for the C1 advanced exam achieve a C2 certificate, which is wonderful. Congratulations. That's only 9 students. And at the same time, there are fewer than 50% of the candidates from Morocco who actually get a C1 or better. It's about 47%. And so I had a look at other countries. And if you look in Europe, we can see that there's a lot more of C1 Advanced being taken because they've been doing it for years. And in Central Europe, for example, we have between 23 and 24% of candidates get an A grade, which is the equivalent of a C2 certificate. And the failure rate is way below 1%. And so we have at least 85% of those candidates getting C1 or above. And because it's very new in Morocco, 7 years ago, there weren't any C1 advanced exams. And so you're very early as teachers, and obviously we need some support. We need to support each other in order to prepare our students to maximize their success. And so who better than someone who's got more than 10 years of teaching experience in Central Europe, working on Cambridge exams, particularly the C1 Advanced, fully Delta qualified. We'll talk about difficult exams. The Delta actually has more than a 50% failure rate. So fully qualified Delta English teacher, now teacher trainer with us. We're very proud to welcome and introduce Ben Herbert. Over to you, Ben.
Okay, well, thank you, Simon, and thank you, Miriam, for your introductions. So yeah, let's get started. So I think I've already been introduced, but yeah, I've been working in the field of ELT now for over 14 years, mainly in Central Europe, but also in North Africa during some of that time as well. Unfortunately, not in Morocco, but it's a country which I would very much like to visit in a professional sense and see what is happening there with ELT. Today, I just want us to get an overview of the Cambridge C1 Advanced exam. So we'll see each part of the exam and what each part entails. But as we go through, I would like you just to think what effect preparing your learners for this exam might have on their language learning. When we talk about exams and tests, one concept which often turns up is something called the backwash effect. So this is the effect that an exam has on the learning that precedes the exam. And I hope as we go through the presentation today, you'll see that the way the exam has been designed should ensure that our learners' language develops in a desirable way as a result of preparing for the exam. We'll also look at how this exam has been integrated into some of the Cambridge materials, and specifically, we will look at Complete Advanced Third Edition. So turning to the exam itself, here at Cambridge University Press and Assessment, we consider it part of our mission to help people not just learn English, but also prove their skills to the world. And that's where the Cambridge Exam Suite comes in. So the suite of exams we have are a series of proficiency exams, each at a dedicated level, and because they are assessed externally, they provide an impartial form of assessment which is recognized around the world. The exams, the C1 Advanced exam included, assesses for 4 key skills, and as much as possible, these are done in ways which relate to everyday situations. So again, by preparing our learners for this exam, we actually help them develop their English in a way that they can use in daily life. So yeah, the C1 Advanced exam is referenced to the C1 level of the Common European Framework reference for languages. And this has very explicitly been built into the exam itself. So we have here a table which shows the can-do statements that we would expect speakers of English at C1 level to be able to do. And the exam basically tests these can-do statements. So I hope you can see already that this exam has been designed with your learners' skills in mind, and specifically skills that relate to real life situations. So overall, this exam, the C1 Advanced, is aimed at learners with, as you would expect, a high level of proficiency. And in fact, it is accepted by many universities worldwide as providing sufficient evidence that a learner is capable of studying an academic course in English. But it also provides evidence of a sufficiently high level of English to be able to operate efficiently at managerial and professional level, to communicate with confidence with colleagues in meetings, for example. And just overall, I find this certificate does help candidates just stand out and differentiate themselves in the job market. So let's look at what the exam is actually composed of. So there are 4 papers which the candidates need to take as part of this exam. So they cover the 4 skills as well as use of English. So that's like the candidate's understanding of the structure of the language. These 4 papers are taken in this order. So paper 1 is for reading and use of English, which lasts 90 minutes. There's then a writing paper, again, 90 minutes, followed by a listening paper, which is about 40 minutes, depending on the length of the audio recordings. There's also a speaking paper. Now, the speaking can take place on the same day as the other papers, but it can also take place up to a week before or after. So I think that's something our candidates need to be aware of when they're registering for the exam. The date of the speaking might not be the same as the date of the other parts of the test. So let's take a look now at the first paper, the reading and use of English. So this paper is divided into 8 parts, and the candidate needs to complete all of this in 90 minutes. So there's no extra time after that 90 minutes for the candidates to complete their answer papers. Everything needs to be done in that time. The first question, part 1, is in this format. So here we have 8 questions. So each question is worth 1 mark. And this is what's known as a multiple choice close. Now, in the first 4 parts of the reading and use of English, which focus just on use of English, there's always an example answer given at the top of the paper. So we can see here that for gap 0, the example, there are 4 possible answers, and the correct answer has been highlighted. So in this type of question, the candidates need to choose, for each gap, they need to choose the correct option from a choice of 4. So here's what the answers would be. So the candidates, again, as I said, would have to choose. So this is very much testing the candidates' knowledge of things such as idioms, collocations, fixed phrases, complementation, phrasal verbs, and sometimes just semantic precision, so the exact meanings of certain words. So for this type of exercise, I often find that this is something which, although we can train the learners in the technique for this, their success is really going to depend on the depth of their knowledge of the language. And I think this is where encouraging our learners to just expose themselves to as much of the language as possible outside the classroom is really important. Over the years, when I've taught on exam preparation classes, it's always been quite clear to me, even after just the first month or 2 months, which learners are actively reading or listening to lots of English outside the classroom, and just developing that sort of knowledge of collocations and dependent prepositions and things, and those who are only studying inside the classroom. So a tip for this part from me would be definitely to try to encourage your learners to expose themselves to as much language outside the classroom. Just turning to the published material that we have to help learners prepare for the exam, I found a page here from Complete Advanced, the 3rd edition, and as you can see, there's some exam practice of this part of the exam. And what I like about this publication is that it's not just a series of exam practice activities. So if we look at this page, we can see that some exam advice has been included. This is something which is included throughout the book for all of the different parts of the exam. But we can see that this activity has been scaffolded with some preparatory tasks, and also there's a post-task discussion. So although the aim of this, the objective is very much to give the learners some exam practice, we're able to just get more out of this. And I think actually just showing our learners that before they tackle one of these questions in the exam, that they can actually maybe just think about the topic and what they know, that can actually help them in the exam as well. So not only are they getting that practice of the actual type of question in there and the techniques that they'll need, but we're also showing them that it's possible to just think around the topic before they start answering. Part 2 is very similar. There's 8 questions with 1 mark each, but this time it's what's called an open close. So in this type of question, we don't have a multiple choice element. So the learners are expected to answer the questions, putting 1 word in the gap based on their knowledge of the language. The focus here is a little bit different. So whereas with part 1, it was very much about vocabulary, this part is much more about what I like to call the grammar words. So things like auxiliaries, interrogative pronouns, modal verbs, these often appear in this type of question. Although, again, there is some focus on vocabulary. Part 3, again, has 8 questions with 1 mark each, and this is very much focused on word formation. So the learners are given a word, and they then need to change that word slightly so that it fits in the gap. So this means that they need to think about what affixes, so prefixes and suffixes, they might need to add to the word. But there might also be some internal changes that take place when we change a word from one word class to another. So they need to be aware of that. And compounding as well. So joining words together, that can sometimes be tested. I find with this, it's something which the learners obviously need a lot of practice of in class, and sometimes just making them aware of some of the little tricks they need to employ in order to get the correct answer. I find one area here where candidates often make mistakes is that they, for example, they look around the gap, and let's say they see that they need a noun. So they look at their base word and they go, aha, this is how I change it into a noun. They change the word into a noun, but they haven't read the sentence fully, and they haven't noticed from the context that yes, they need a noun, but it needs to be negative. So I think here it's always quite important that we encourage our learners to always double check that they don't need to make any additional changes to the word, and also to read through the whole text once they've completed it, just to make sure that it makes sense to them. Okay, next we've got part 4. Now, this part is part of the exam which candidates often find a little bit more challenging. So we've got 6 questions here, but potentially our candidates can get up to 2 marks for each one. And here they need to change a sentence so that it means the same whilst keeping one word exactly the same. So we can see from our example at the top, we have James would only speak to the head of department alone. That's the example sentence. And we have the word on. So we then need to complete the sentence below so that it means exactly the same thing and includes the word on. And we're not allowed to change that word in any way. It must stay exactly the same. Also note, the candidates need to use between 3 and 6 words. So there's a clear word limit as well. And it's important to impress on them that for this question and for the others, contractions count as 2 separate words. So let's try doing one of these together. I think it would be good if you could write your answers in the chat. So here we have an example. And one thing I often do with my learners in class to train them for this is I always encourage them just to analyze that original sentence and see what information they already have in the second sentence. So if we look here, we can see that the highlighted words are already in that second sentence. So what we really need to focus on is the meaning of those words in the middle. And we have the word spite. So I'll just see if I can, there's the chat. Now I see a lot of people are writing in spite of. Now that, I really like that. So we've got in spite of, okay. I see Herlack. And yeah, that's correct. Well done. So this part of the exam can be a bit more challenging because of having to change the sentence but keep the meaning and use a particular word. But notice this spite. So a lot of you immediately knew spite in spite of. So I think making it clear to our learners in class and when they're candidates in the exam that just taking that keyword and thinking about how it's used can really help them then answer the question. So if we have in spite of, we then know that after that we need some kind of noun. So helping your learners understand that this is how they need to think about the question can be really helpful. You'll notice often in the answer. So for example, I took this this question from the handbook for exam handbook for teachers, which I'll give you a link to at the end of the presentation. There's this little pipe symbol, and I think this is a good way of thinking about this task because not all the time, but in the vast majority of cases, there's 2 things that we need to do. So here, one thing was integrate spite into the sentence, so in spite of, and then the next was knowing that we needed a noun after it. So again, as a way of helping my learners, I've often encouraged them to try and think about this part of the exam in that way. Like, what are the 2 things which are being expected of them? So that's the use of English parts of the exam. Next, in the same paper, so within the same 90 minutes, there's the reading. Now, the reading is divided into 4 parts. The first one is a multiple choice, where we have 6 questions, and each answer is worth 2 marks. This is it's fairly straightforward, and there's plenty of advice and practice of this in the exam preparation books. One thing I often do is just encourage my learners to underline keywords in the question stems, but then look in the text and use those keywords to help them identify where the answer is in the text, and then read around it and just try to answer it in their own words first. This can be quite useful, because when they then come to compare their possible answer with the 4 options, it just means that they're a little bit better prepared to deal with any distractors, so any answers that have been put in there to try and confuse them. Okay. Part 6 is a little bit different. Now, in part 6, there's only 4 questions, with 2 marks each, and we call this cross-text multiple matching. So they're all here, the candidates are given 4 separate texts from 4 different authors, but on the same topic. So here, for example, we have 4 texts about how architecture can affect emotions. They then have to compare the different texts to answer these questions. So we can see from the examples here, we have like, which reviewer has a different opinion from the others on the confidence with which de Botton discusses architecture. So they would have to be able to read all the texts and see which one has a different opinion. So this is very much focused on understanding the different attitudes and opinions of the 4 different authors and being able to compare and contrast them. Okay. Now part 7 is another part of the exam which candidates often find a little bit more challenging. And I remember when I first started as a teacher preparing my learners for exams, I actually found this a bit challenging myself. In fact, when I was doing my Delta, I actually focused on this type of task in one of my lessons, because I wanted to improve in this area. So this part of the exam has 6 questions, again with 2 marks each, and it's what's called a gapped text. Now you can see we have a whole text, but there are 6 gaps missing. There's 6 paragraphs which have been taken out of the material, and because the examiners are very kind, they've not only given 6 paragraphs back, but they've given an extra paragraph as well. So this is testing our learners' ability to read for cohesion and coherence, to understand the whole structure of a text, and like the global meaning, like what's going on generally in the text. Now, I think there's kind of 2 ways we can help our learners deal with this type of question. And when I'm preparing them for the exam, I like to demonstrate both of them. Personally, I feel that using a combination of the 2 is the best method, but I've noticed some of my learners have a preference for one over the other. And as long as they're aware that there's these 2 different techniques, I'm normally happy with that. So let's look just at the first question here. So gap number 41. Because a large part of this is testing our learners' ability to take a look at the big picture of a text, to understand what ideas are in the text and the order in which they appear. I think one good thing to do first is to analyze that base text. So I encourage my learners to just very quickly just read the paragraphs and write a very short descriptive note next to each one. And it really doesn't have to be too detailed. You know, the clock is ticking in the exam. So what we would see around gap 41 would be something like this. So in that first paragraph that's included in the text, the writer's talking about a picture of an aggressive animal. And then in the the third paragraph, we have something about the appearance of the animal. And I'd encourage them to do this for the whole text, because even with these gaps missing, we get a good overview of the ideas and the order in which they're appearing in the text. So now that we've got this idea, we've got the picture of the aggressive animal, the appearance, well, that whatever goes in that gap will have to be something which fits logically there. So can anyone just by very quickly skim reading these paragraphs here, can you see a paragraph that would fit logically in terms of the idea? I think someone said B, but if we look with B, like this is telling us about like how it moves, like what it does, how it hunts. So that doesn't quite fit in the gap. We're seeing a few other letters. Aha. Well, I think just looking through these, I can see I can see why some people are saying F, because F is still quite general, isn't it? And so I can see why some people are saying F, but also G. G is also, we've got the thing about the image, and it's kind of that it's just comparing this animal to a domestic cat. So if we now look back here and think, in this gap, we have maybe F or maybe G. So we've used our understanding of the big picture. We can now kind of zoom in and look at the details. And if we look just after that gap, we've got all this. However, so we know there's some contrast. And the wildcat is a much larger animal. The coat pattern is superficially similar to a domestic tabby cat. So we've got all these little clues here that in 41, there must be some other animal that the wildcat is being compared to. And so from that, we know that the answer is G. So this is part of the exam which learners find more challenging, but I think it is something which if we can show them that they can combine their knowledge of the big picture of the text and the order of the ideas with looking at the details, like those cohesive elements, like however and the referencing, this can help them get the correct answers. Just moving on, with part 8, we've got 10 questions, and here it's multiple matching. So here the candidates need to match either individual texts or part of a text to each question. So they will normally have either 5 separate texts or one text that has been divided into 5. and they have to notice keywords in the questions and use them to match the answers. I'm just aware of the time, so I'll move on. In the writing exam, there are 2 parts, and each part is worth an equal amount of points. There's always an essay. So this is a compulsory part of the exam, and so the learners, yeah, they need to write an essay. They're always given some input for the essay, so they're given some ideas, and they're also given some quotes which they can either use or use for inspiration in their writing. Part 2, on the other hand, is a little bit different. Part 2 involves a choice. So they have to only write one answer in part 2, but they are given a choice of 3 different types of text, 3 different genres. And these can be a letter or an email, a proposal, a report, or a review. Now, when the writing is marked, the examiner will mark based on these 4 subscales. So we have content, so how well the candidates have answered the question. Communicative achievement, so have they used the appropriate style and register, for example. Like, how well have they organized the writing? So this is about not just the coherence of the writing, so the order of the ideas, but also the cohesion. Like, how do they fit the ideas together within paragraphs, and also the range and accuracy of their language. And I find that actually preparing our learners for these exams and making our learners aware that this is how their writing will be marked in the exam can have a very positive impact on their writing overall. I find many candidates often panic when it comes to writing. They think maybe that because they're not good at spelling or they're not good at grammar, that they're going to do really badly in the writing exam. But as we can see, if we explain to our learners that actually we're interested in their content, we're interested in how they organize their ideas, we're interested in if they're trying to write in an appropriate style, for example, I think this can actually have a really positive impact on our learners and show them that writing is more than about just spelling and grammar. In the handbook, which, as I said, you'll get a link to at the end of the presentation, there are these writing assessment scales. So you can see just roughly how the examiners mark writing, and there are also some example written tasks along with the examiner's comments. So this can help you if you're preparing your learners for the exam and they give you writing. This can help you mark your learners' writing and give them feedback so they can improve. One thing I would just point out though is notice for the content and communicative achievement, something called the target reader is mentioned. So one thing I've often done as part of my exam preparation courses is just include a few exercises where I've asked the learners to really focus on their target reader. So, and this does not have to be necessarily with a piece of writing that's exam practice. I've practiced it, for example, with writing invitations. So we decided that we were going to have a class party, and we were going to invite some celebrities to the party. And we got some pictures of different famous people, and I put them around the room, and the learners had to write an invitation to the class party, but they had to really think about who they were writing to and trying to make the invitation seem as interesting as possible to that particular person. But that's just like one way we can get our learners to begin to think about this, because if they're able to really have that target reader in mind when they're writing, then that should help them get good marks for their content and also for their communicative achievement when they take the exam. In terms of the course book material, there's writing included in every unit in Complete Advanced. And again, there's always some information about the exam, some hints and tips. But what I quite like about the material is because it's been designed for use in the classroom, there's plenty of opportunity for the learners to analyze the task and so see how they need to analyze the exam questions when they come to take the exam. And also because for the exam they very much need to write in specific genres, there's a bit of genre analysis included as well. So there are like model answers which the learners are then asked to analyze and look at the features of before they then write their own answers. So the material really does help develop their exam skills. Also, at the back of the book, there is a writing bank. So there are some pages where there's material on each of the genres of writing that the candidates would need to be able to do in the exam. And again, there's model answers and there's work where they analyze the model answer and look at the features of that particular genre. So that's really useful. It's some extra support which can really help learners improve their writing. With the listening, we have 4 parts. The first one is multiple choice, but here the candidates have to listen to some extracts from a short conversation. And so they're being tested on how well they understand the feeling and the attitudes of the speakers. There's 3 extracts and there's 2 questions for each one, and the candidates can listen twice to each extract. In part 2 of the listening, there's a note completion task. So the candidates are they have to listen to a monologue and they have to complete some notes based on the content of that monologue. I thought we could perhaps take a look at this. So I have here just 2 questions from this example. The learners are always given some context. So we know we're going to listen to someone called Josh talking about a trip to South Africa and that he was studying botany. And what I encourage my learners to do in the classroom and to do as candidates when they're in the exam is to really look at these questions and try to do 2 things. So one thing is to look for some keywords that might indicate that the answer is coming. So here, as we listen to Josh, we know as well as his research projects are. So when we hear research project or something similar, we know that the answer is coming. So look for these keywords that will indicate that the answer is on its way. But then we can look around that gap and see if there's any clues that might tell us what type of word we're listening for. So we now know that the answer is going to be something which involves writing, and it's probably going to be quite academic because he's a university student. So we now have a much better idea of what we're listening for. And you can even ask the learners to brainstorm possible ideas, things that might fill the gap. And we can do the same here. So check out a particular region. We might hear something like plan to visit a particular area, for example. So when we hear words which are related to these, that should trigger us to think, aha, the answer's coming. And then after a that occurred there, so we know we're listening for some kind of event. So this is something that can be quite useful, just really breaking those question stems down and teaching our learners how they can use them to make their lives that little bit easier in the exam. Part 3 is just a traditional multiple choice. So the learners will listen to an extended conversation. It's normally in the form of an interview, and they have some multiple choice questions. And in part 4, they listen to 5 different speakers, and for each speaker, they need to match an answer for task 1 and an answer for task 2. Okay. In the speaking test, this is where the exam is, I'd say, is quite different to other forms of assessment, such as IELTS, because, well, I think you can see that there's more people in the room. So in the speaking test, there's always an interlocutor, an examiner, and at least 2 candidates. So the interlocutor kind of manages the flow of the exam and interacts with the candidates. The examiner just sits and listens because they have an important job to do. There needs to be at least 2 candidates in the exam because part of the speaking exam focuses on spoken interaction, but it can be the case that there can be 3 candidates. This happens just based on the number of people who are registered for the exam that day. If there are 3 candidates, then the speaking exam will last a little bit longer, and the interlocutor has some instructions to make sure that each part of the exam lasts a few minutes longer. So the speaking exam is divided into 4 parts, and the first part only takes like a couple of minutes, 3 minutes if there's 3 candidates. And here, the interlocutor just asks each candidate some questions. So the interaction is very much between the interlocutor and the candidates. And as you can see from the example script here, the questions are fairly straightforward, and just because they're fairly straightforward doesn't mean that it's not an opportunity for our learners to give extended answers. So when I'm preparing my learners for the exam, one thing I often do is we do look at this area of the exam and we practice just giving longer answers to these questions. just so that your learners know that they shouldn't just answer with a one-word answer. They need to answer the question and then maybe give one or two more pieces of information or comment on their answer. Part two is a bit different though. In part two, each candidate is shown 3 pictures, and they're asked to speak about 2 of the pictures for 1 minute. The other candidate during this time doesn't need to say anything, but they are then given 30 seconds to respond to the pictures in some way afterwards as well. So this part of the exam is very much testing the candidate's ability to speak for a longer period of time uninterrupted, and so show that they can structure their speech in a more logical way. So yeah, the focus is very much on like organizing their speech, and they do need to compare and describe the pictures. And I think this is something where it's just a little bit different to the B2 exam. In the B2 exam, candidates can sometimes get away with less speculation, but here in the C1 exam, we really want them to be able to speculate when they compare 2 of the pictures. So even notice the language in the question box. Why might the people be doing these things? How might the people be feeling? So one thing I do with my learners when I'm preparing them for this is sometimes I use images from the course book. Very often in the course book, there can be like a selection of images at the beginning of the unit, and we just practice this activity with those images. But also we sometimes cut pictures from magazines, and we make our own versions of this question and then practice them in class. But I think it is important to try and give your learners a lot of practice of this, because it's one of the more kind of unnatural parts of the exam, in that it's not something that happens to us often, that we need to compare and contrast 2 pictures. So I think the more often we can just practice this in class, the better. In part 3, the candidates are given an interactive task. So they're given a spider diagram, and we'll see an example in a couple of minutes, and they need to have a discussion. So again, this is where just the fact that that in order to operate properly at C1 level, our candidates need to be able to discuss, for example, matters at work, perform well in meetings, and this part of the exam really helps kind of focus in on that as a skill, because it's interactive. So there's first of all a discussion phase where the candidates are given some input and they need to discuss the different elements of it. Again, we'll see an example in a minute. But then afterwards, there's a decision phase. So the discussion phase is kind of very general, and they're just giving their opinions. And then the interlocutor asks them to make a decision, and they have just a bit more time to make a decision. So if we look here, you can see here's an example. And in the initial discussion phase, the candidates would just need to think about how these things, what people might have to consider when making these decisions. So again, it's quite speculative. But in that final minute, they would be asked, which one is the most important? for example. Part 4 is then just basically some follow-up questions, and the questions are always based on the same topic as part 3. So we have the idea that part 3 is quite interactive, and then in part 4, the interlocutor will ask the candidates just some deeper questions on those topics. And again, it's an opportunity for the candidates to show that they can express themselves, justify their opinions, agree, and speculate. The speaking is assessed in a similar way, not exactly the same, but similar to the writing. So again, there's this table, which you can find in the handbook, which shows you the different criteria that the examiner's listening for, but also the interlocutor as well. So the examiner will give most of the marks. The interlocutor gives some marks for what's called global achievement, because obviously that the interlocutor's too busy managing the exam to be able to grade these other areas properly. When the candidates get their results, as Simon mentioned earlier, they will get different grades. So although the C1 advanced exam is very much focused at C1 level, the candidate will receive a specific grade on their certificate. So if during the exam they've demonstrated overall that they are at C1 level, they will get either grade C or grade B. But if a candidate demonstrates an even higher level of English, it's possible for them to get a grade A, and this corresponds to C2 level on the Common European Framework. It's also possible if a candidate doesn't quite demonstrate that they have enough to be considered a C1 candidate, but they've demonstrated that they have a B2 level of English in the exam, then it will say on their certificate that they achieved level B2. So there is some leeway both above and below the C1 band for that to be recognized on their certificate. Just looking at the materials that we have, I've drawn today from Complete Advanced, from the 3rd edition, and I just thought I'd like to show you the map of the units. I hope you can see that this book has clearly been designed with the exam in mind. So we have reading and use of English, writing, listening and speaking, exam practice incorporated throughout the book in every unit. But there's also, as the learners go through, there's some vocabulary and grammar work as well. So this book has been designed to help improve the learner's overall level of English. It's not just about exam practice. The book comes with a workbook, and again, the workbook has a review not just of the language taught in each unit, but also some additional exam practice as well. So there's plenty of opportunities if you're preparing your learners for the exam to give them the practice that they'll need using this material. In terms of the resources for teachers, I've got some QR codes here, so I'll send a PDF of this presentation to you. We've got the C1 Advanced Exam Handbook for Teachers from Cambridge. So this has some really useful exam tips for each part of the exam, but it's also got, as I said, those example writing answers and the grades that they were given from an examiner, so it can help you with your marking. there's also a link to the Cambridge C1 Advanced Exam webpage. So this page has some information, just some practical information about how to take the exam, as well as some information about where the exam is recognised, and how the results are reported, and also the English with Cambridge YouTube channel, which has some, well, a variety of speaking exam examples which you can use with your classes. There's also the C1 Advanced Teaching Tips, which again have a wealth of tips for teachers based on each part of the exam. So thank you for your time. And any questions? Simon, have you been curating
Well,
questions?
I've been looking at the questions. There's a couple. The three more questions have just come through. Mohammed has been diligently answering the questions. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. There are some questions remaining though, so maybe I could read these out now, unless Mohammed would like to do that. Mohammed, have you been curating these questions?
Yes, Simon.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I answered some questions, some of the participants' questions, and then some others that I wanted Mr. Ben to answer himself. Okay, so for example, there is a question from Ahmed Bakush saying, given the variety of themes or topics, plus advanced grammar and vocabulary, are the Cambridge materials textbooks comprehensive enough to use with students to prepare them for this level C1?
Yeah, I would say definitely, like the materials include a lot of practice of each part of the exam, but as I said, also develop the learners' language as they go through the course. Obviously, we also have the workbook, and there's additional material that teachers can access on the Cambridge One platform as well. So there's a wealth of material out there. Also, this course book has been designed to prepare learners for the exam within like one academic year. So there's definitely enough material there. And also, I think it's important to try and just exploit what is there as much as possible. So for example, I mentioned if you have at the introduction of a unit, like several different images, well, perhaps you could create a question in the style of speaking part 2 and get your learners to practice speaking part 2 using those images. You could also make sure to just use any reading texts, but also some of the use of English practice texts, especially for parts 1 and 2, to highlight areas of language such as collocation, dependent prepositions, patterns after verbs, for example. And I think just spending that bit of time in class to really sort of squeeze as much as you can out of that material, it really helps just illustrate to the learners what they need to be doing in order to pass the exam. So there's definitely enough material there.
Thank you, Ben. Mohammed, do you have another question you'd like them to answer?
Yes, thank you, Ben. There is Jabran Shakir, who's asking about some techniques that can accelerate the students' adaptation to these test formats.
Well, I think, I mean, the course has been designed to introduce the learners to the exam as they go go through the course. I personally like to follow that at least for the first couple of months, just because I think very often it's important to give the learners some sort of graded introduction to the exam before overwhelming them with exam practice. I think as a course goes on, it's possible to give them some mock exams, which is important because they need to learn how to manage their time during the exam. For example, you can't do that using a course book, but at the same time, having too much of an exam focus early on in the course can sometimes, just if you have some weaker students, it can result in a loss of motivation. I think if the learners can see that they're developing their language as they're going through the course and they're getting exam practice, that combination of the two is often a lot more motivating.
Thank you, Ben. Mohammed, another question?
Yes, thank you so much, Ben. I have another question by Asiya Bilali. She's asking, I have a question about the grades for each part of the C1 advanced exam. For example, in the reading and use of English section, what score is required to achieve the C1 level?
I don't have that information to hand, but it's in the handbook. I think the candidates do get a score back on their for their results in each part of the exam, so the reading, the speaking, etc. But that is a Cambridge score. It's not related, or how should I put it? Their exact score in the exam does not always necessarily relate to a precise point on the Cambridge scale, just because of the way exams are moderated. So yeah, from what I remember in the handbook, there isn't like a precise like correlation between the score and the grade.
So what you're saying, Ben, is that unlike the productive skills, so speaking and writing, we know that it's 3 out of 5 for each criteria. So that's 60%. So when you add up the 4 criteria, you have 4 scores out of 5. 3 out of 5 is the passing grade, and above 4 is a B grade, and then you need 5 out of 5 for
I think when I've prepared my candidates in the past, I've always said like 60% as just for each section. 60% as a rough idea is normally what to aim for in terms of a pass.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Mohammed. Maybe the last question because it's nearly 1:15.
Yes, thank you so much, Simon. So the last question is about textbooks. So Nuhaila Sukan is asking, so she said, in our school, we prepare students with compact advanced. Is it a good option as complete? Why or why not? Thank you.
I don't have much experience working with compact, so I'm not really in a position to.
Can I jump in on this, Ben?
Yeah.
We've been using. I started work in France in 2006, and compact came out in around about 2008, 2009, and I know that it was something that the French schools liked because they only had an hour a week of specific Cambridge preparation. Compact originally was designed for that short 40 to 50 hours in a year to prepare for the Cambridge exam. but it's not designed to get your students up to that level. So the idea is that if they've got a C1 level already and they want to take the exam, then compact is great. If they need to work, you know, up from the B2 level, so they need to improve their English and prepare for the exam, then they're better off taking something like complete or objective or open world. Having said that, there's so much available now with Test and Train, with extra material, that it's no longer just a student's book and a workbook. All the digital pack is pretty immense. So I would say that compact now is certainly something that you can look at, not just to prepare for the exam, but also to improve your English while you go. It's more a question of personal preference now. We're running over time. Chilla. So Chilla and Noha are wonderful organizers behind the scene. Chilla, would you like to say a few words
Yes,
closing and follow-up?
yes, thank you so much for this useful webinar and all the participants for coming. And regarding follow-up, we are going to send you the recording of the webinar with the certificates with an email next week. And we look forward to seeing you at our other events coming up and other webinars. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Chilla. And well, just thank you very much, Benjamin. Thank you for all the participants. Our Calliope colleagues, Miriam, would you like to say a word or two?
Okay, I would like to thank all of you because you have been really numerous this morning. So please don't hesitate to reach out. You have the email addresses of our reps. And in fact, you can even reach out to Simon. And I hope we will have the opportunity to see Simon and Ben face to face very soon.
Inshallah. Thank
Thanks
you,
again.
everyone.
Thank you all. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.